Hello, everyone. Is anybody there? Let's see. Hi, everyone. Waiting for a few people to show up and join. Ah, there's Allison. Super cool. So you guys can see me. Okay. So then I can start because I have a lot of questions that I need to answer. And I think that we may not have time to answer additional questions or additional topics. I was going to talk a little bit about cholesterol, but I don't think that that is going to be happening. So hi, everybody. Happy Saturday. I hope that my camera is working fine because I had some trouble with the camera of late. And it seems like I get everybody. Tenji, Lisa, Lucretia, Sue. Awesome. Very good. Janice. All right. So let me start. And then whatever you guys miss or come, those of you who come on later, you can see the repeat separately later. So let me start. So the first question was from Carol Griffin. And that was, what is the usual path to healing from insulin resistance? For example, what changes in the 5-hour glucose test lead to what modification of macros as one progresses from carnivore diet to keto? So this is a very complicated question. So let me talk a little bit about insulin resistance in general. When you have insulin resistance, there's really only one path, and that is you got to stop eating the thing that actually causes your insulin resistance. And we know very well what that is by now. We know it is carbohydrates. So as long as you continue eating carbohydrates, even if it's a small amount, it will thwart your recovery. If you completely stop eating carbohydrates, that is your fastest way to recovery. We know that there are various protocols. Dr. Funk, who starts everybody on a 5-day fast, and then every single week they do so many fasts and so forth. Yes, those all help because there are no carbohydrates. And in those, you immediately switch to ketosis, where you can start burning your fat as well. So your stored insulin resistance goes away. I actually have a response on this later for Janice, in that when the fat that you store around your body, the unhealthy fat, contains remnants of your insulin resistance. So as you reduce your fat, your insulin resistance also goes away. So your only way really to reverse insulin resistance is to reduce or completely stop all carbohydrates. The 5-hour test that leads to modifications of whether it's carnivore or keto diet, that is based on strictly on whether you have hypoglycemia or reactive hypoglycemia. These two. If you do have those, you can fast, but you have to continuously monitor with blood glucose testing as well as blood ketone testing if you're about to have a sugar crash or runaway ketones, and then you have to modify that. So if you don't have any hypoglycemic form, then you can get straight into ketosis and you can get straight to fasting. However, insulin resistance is a form of type 2 diabetes. So as you are reversing your insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, you're going to go through the exact same process as you came in. So when you came into a door of insulin resistance, think of it as a door. When you leave, you have to go back the same way as you came. You probably had, you may not even have noticed, reactive hypoglycemia all the way through at the very beginning. That is the usual start. You feel shaky and have a sugar crash when you're hungry. That is the first sign of insulin resistance, and that is hypoglycemia. And so even if you now don't show hypoglycemia or reactive hypoglycemia, eventually in your recovery process, you will reach a point of hypoglycemia. So at that point, you will be better off switching to carnivore diet, because as long as you are fasting, that is going to be a pronounced problem. So Elaine Shields, she has a huge question with a lot of sub questions. So let me take it one by one. So question 1, what's the best course of action for someone like me who didn't do well on carnivore diet or zero carb, seems to have stable blood glucose and blood ketones while keto, but still getting frequent and intense migraines? So this is a very good question. It is not just about the carnivore diet or the zero carb diet or the sodium potassium balance, but it has a lot to do with the sugar or the glucose balance. So even if you're on a carnivore diet or the zero carb diet and you're not doing well, chances of why you're not doing well is because you're not getting enough glucose out of the protein the proper way. This is very common. We talk about it all the time. It is greatly important that you actually get the 5-hour blood glucose and blood ketone test so we can monitor whether you do or do not have any problems on the zero carb diet. Being uncomfortable on the zero carb diet or carnivore diet doesn't mean it doesn't work. Okay. Then also, I was not quite sure what Elaine meant by not doing well on the carnivore and keto diet. Is that, or zero carb diet, is that because of just getting migraines or not getting energy or feeling sick, or what the problem is? Because we have solutions for this in the group. So this is something that we should discuss in the group. The next question from her is that she gets migraines before period and at ovulation, and increasing potassium and sodium doesn't help. Yes, it doesn't help. We have a variety of solutions for this. One of them is, for example, cutting back carbohydrates completely and modifying the sodium and potassium, either by increasing or decreasing sodium. We had some people in the group who discovered that they retain water. But actually, they discovered that they needed potassium instead of sodium during the ovulation as well as during PMS. And then we discovered it was because they retained water. So you need to get on the scale and keep on checking every single day, same time. I usually check my weight every single morning, and I have a scale that connects to the phone, to my cell phone, and I get a graph that tells me whether I gained weight or I didn't. So if I have a sudden gain of weight, 2.5 pounds, I know, hey, I retained water. I may not see it. It may not be an edema just around my ankles or my eyes. It may be a systemic edema, which would be highly likely for PMS or ovulation. So if you have that kind of a problem, potassium and sodium will not work the way that it normally works, and the carnivore or the zero carb diets won't work because the problem is that you retain water and it's edema. So in that case, you will need to increase your potassium source. There's information about that. We have a couple of long threads in the group. And then the non-hormonal migraines that don't respond to potassium and sodium, no, they will not respond to that necessarily. Again, it could be edema related, or it could be related to simply your intolerability of carbohydrates. So you will need to look at all points at once, not individually. And the 5-hour blood glucose and blood ketone tests are the way to monitor how you're doing in this. Barb Schemper asked a couple of very good questions, or actually one good question that I have several answers. So she said she's looking forward to hearing more about carnivore diet way of eating. Well, we have a whole lot of information about the carnivore diet in the group. So you need to look up what it means to be carnivore way of eating. The goal of, you said the goal that you know is to get rid of insulin resistance. That is one goal, actually, because it can also be that you simply don't want to fuss with having to calculate your carbohydrates, the sodium, whatever. It's actually a much easier way of eating. Many of us selectively just pick to eat carnivore diet, even if you don't need to, because we just like it. It's just an easier way of being. And you said that you're confused about the different macros. And yes, we have the 50-50. We have when you can eat 70% of fat and 30% protein, or the other way around, 70% protein and 30% fat. These are all dependent upon how insulin resistant you are. If you're not insulin resistant, you can pick any of these three. It really doesn't matter. You can then eat any carnivore diet macro that you wish, that you feel good, because you don't have insulin resistance. You're eating perfectly as long as your sodium and potassium are balanced, and you're getting enough protein. This is important, that you need to get enough protein, and we have a formula under files that we recommend around 1 gram protein per kilogram of your weight. So you need to calculate, that's minimum. The FDA or USDA recommends minimum, minimum 0.6 grams of protein per kilogram of weight. That is written in there, that is the absolute minimum. And some people may do okay on that. It is not necessarily enough for energy of cell replacement. So protein is used for cellular recovery and not for the kind of energy, at least not as long as you're fully acclimated to carnivore diet for your general energy, like running a marathon, okay? So the kind of, and Tangi asked the same question, so the kind of macros that you're going to have is going to pretty much be based on initially on your 5-hour blood glucose and blood ketone tests. And then it will be modified as you improve. And we had several people already improving in this, and then they could modify their protein and fat ratios as they went. And that modification has to be pretty slow. So then Lulu, she asked a lot of questions. So she says, why does it take for the body to shift? Why does it take so long? Okay, so this is a long answer. Think of your body as a chain reaction of every single organ and every single cell. So if you have insulin resistance, it isn't a problem of one thing. It is a problem for your whole body. And so if you change insulin resistance, say, in your liver, okay, that would be the first thing actually that apparently improves, because once you quit eating carbohydrates, your fatty liver reverses. So at least your liver is starting to be able to function. And in order to reverse a fatty liver, that means your liver's gotten rid of the fat that is deposited in it for storage in a form of triglycerides to be used later as energy. So that's step number one. But just because you don't have a fatty liver now, it doesn't mean you're actually cured from insulin resistance. It means that, okay, so one organ is okay, now let's go to another organ. So it'll keep on going for all through your body. And so just to let you know, I've been on the ketogenic diet for nearly 5 years, excuse me, on the carnivore for 8 months. And I never have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or even insulin resistance, although I have found that I had insulin resistance on one oral glucose tolerance test, and the doctor never told me I had it, but I discovered the records, and in fact, I had it. It has taken me 5 years and 8 months to reverse my insulin resistance. And I only know that because I went to get my NMR cholesterol test a month ago. And this is also part of my answers to Janice Fulton, who asked this earlier. When you get the NMR, it's a nuclear magnetic resonance imaging of your cholesterol, or your blood, to get information about your cholesterol and your particles. And it also looks at, not from all companies, but from LabCorp, they also look at insulin resistance of your lipids, which is the fat that is deposited around your stomach and around your waistline and all in the wrong places. That insulin resistance score they give you is on a curve, like people the average people will be on the very top, which would be 50% of the people. And then so many percent they'll be lower in insulin resistance status, and so many percent will be higher than that. And so your goal is to not be on the top and not to be in the tail that is discussing those people who have higher than normal insulin resistance. You want to be in the left side that shows less than 27%. And so I am finally on 25% off, so I'm even below the lower part. So finally I reversed the insulin resistance in my lipid. It doesn't mean that I don't have insulin resistance, for example, in my brain. I have no way of knowing that. So in the body, every single tissue, cell, organ, everything is connected. So it will take a very long time to have your whole body recover. With this being said and done, you don't need to have your whole body recover to start feeling really good, okay? The actual recovery plan part, the reason why the body takes so long. So let me back up and talk a little bit about cholesterol and about diet. Many people among the migraineurs, if not all, were coming either from the standard American diet, which we call SAD, or were vegetarians or vegans. Nobody else was on any other kind of a diet. And if you're considering what plants do to our body, we understand that plants are not us, right? So we know that they have different blood. They have blood. It's just not red. It's green. They have different mineral and nutrient requirements. They do have a central nervous system. Typically, it's very primitive, but they do think, talk, feel, and everything. So they have similarity to us, but they have a huge differences. So when I talk about similarities, they have the same kind of organization. They have mitochondria in their cells, just like we do. They have cholesterol equivalent. Those are the phytosterols in plants. So they have the same system and organization, except they're not thermal beings. So if you put a plant on heat, it's going to just shrivel up and die, whereas humans are hot-blooded. So we live off of some form of thermal energy, which in plants doesn't exist. So this already should tell you that if we eat a lot of plants, we're getting all these plant nutrients, but is it going to be helpful for us as humans, given that we can't actually use plant sterols the same way as we use cholesterol, which is coming from animals? And it was believed for a long time, for example, that plant sterols are better because they reduced our cholesterol levels, the LDL in particular. However, as you have seen me posting a few things in the groups lately, you can see that LDL is not the bad guy. LDL has completely been misunderstood. It is actually the good guy. Having LDL allows your body to heal, to recover. It also protects your brain cells. All the white matter in your brain is made from cholesterol and fatty acids, mostly omega-3, DHA, and EPA. And also, every single cell in your body is basically made up of a layer. The membrane layer is all fat with cholesterol embedded in it. If you remove the cholesterol from the body, we just die. We can't live without cholesterol. So reducing it is already a bad thing, because LDL is actually think of it as a little boat. It's a protein ball in which cholesterol travels, because cholesterol is fat soluble and it cannot move in the water. So it needs to have a boat that can actually travel in the water of your blood. The blood has a lot of water in it. However, this boat doesn't just contain cholesterol. It also contains triglycerides, which are needed for the cell, because again, every cell is made from lipids and cholesterol. And it is also carrying, all the LDL boats are also carrying every single fat-soluble vitamins and minerals. So calcium, vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin K, all of these are carried in your LDL. So people who are told to reduce their LDL, well, what are you reducing? You're reducing all your vitamins and your minerals. Doesn't make any sense. And also, the body makes a lot of cholesterol. Obviously, it has a purpose. The reason for the cholesterol is to create all of our hormones, steroids, hormones, also steroid hormones, female, male, everything is made from that. So when you're looking at eating plants, plants don't have cholesterol. They have their phytosterols. Phytosterols are plant cholesterol equivalents that actually replace animal cholesterol in animal cells. And that is a huge problem. They do decrease LDL. And so people and doctors will tell you, well, eat a lot of vegetable oils. It's good for you. It reduces your LDL. Yes, it does. But it actually replaces your LDL with plant cholesterol, which doesn't function the same way. And so you're losing a lot of functionality. Plus, plant sterols tend to crowd out LDL. And what we find in studies is that people who die from heart attack, for example, most of them have low LDL. So LDL is not the bad guy. Plant sterols are. So if you have come from a diet that had a lot of plant sterols in it, it'll take a lot of time for your body to change every single cell. And the reason why it has to change the cells is because your cells were crowded out from cholesterol, and they don't have enough cholesterol to actually function properly. So they need to be replaced. It's not just a simple matter, because the mitochondria that gives you energy and gives all your cells life actually uses cholesterol. And if it doesn't have it, it is thwarted. So that's a problem. So the other question from Lulu let me see where we starting. Oh, when I see from Barb, I didn't answer a question. That is the goal to get to keto macros. No, it's not the goal. Keto macros are a tool. So if you are eating carnivore or zero carb, you are in ketosis. It really doesn't matter what macro you're going to end up on, but you are going to be in ketosis, and ketosis is the best tool for us. And so therefore, ketosis is a goal that will lead to a migraine-free life. And I noticed another question I missed. Sorry, I can't see sometimes because of my glasses. And that you are told whenever you're hungry to eat whenever you're hungry. But in some of the other processes, you're told to eat only 2 times a day. Yes. So if you're on some diets that can permit time-restricted feeding or fasting, you can fast, but not all diets are suitable. And particularly if you get on the zero carb or the carnivore diet at the beginning, while your body's adjusting to get glucose out of protein and switch over to ketosis, the more you eat, the more likely it is that, excuse me, that you're not going to get a sugar crash and you're not going to have runaway ketones. So we modify how you eat, how often you eat based on your health. Okay, so then, okay, the weight increase, even though you're fasting, and this is back to Lulu. So weight increase, even though you're fasting, she's been doing 18 hours now for several months, 18 months now. And some days 20 hours of time-restricted feeding, still eating 1,800 to 2,000 calories a day, and still has excess 25 pounds that will not budge. So the way this works is that you can't lose weight until you are not reversing, you haven't reversed insulin resistance. And that is because the goal of insulin is to pack weight away. That is what it's supposed to be doing. So as long as you have too much insulin flowing in your blood, you will keep on putting weight away. There's just no alternative. So you need to reduce the amount of insulin in your blood. One potential way of doing that is by reducing the calories that you have taken. You have had a lot of trouble over the past year in terms of getting migraines when you change your diet, reduce the calories, change anything. So you have to be careful about that. But the best way to do it is by either you're increasing your metabolism, and that could happen naturally on its own as your insulin resistance reverses. It will increase your metabolism. It can also increase by your exercise. If you exercise more, then the amount of glycogen your body stores, and your body can burn fat really for the exercise, that's going to help you lose weight. The best way to check that, and I check that on me all the time with my workout, is I will take my blood glucose and ketones before I work out, and then when I come back, I immediately take it again. And what I notice is that my blood glucose doesn't budge. It is 90% of the times it's about 91 before and 91 after. And my ketones are the ones that moving. So when I come back from gym, my ketosis is going to be less. That means I used a lot more ketones. So I used more ketones than what I would have if I had stayed at home sitting and talking to you guys on the computer. So try to exercise. And alternatively, the third option is to reduce the amount of calories that you take in. When you reduce calories, given that you have plenty of calories stored, you say 25 extra pounds, your body is going to start using the saved calories that was saved by your insulin for a rainy day. So if you start eating fewer calories, and provided that you're in ketosis, this doesn't work the same way when you're not in ketosis. But if you're in ketosis, if you reduce your calories, your body will start burning the fat a little bit more than it did before. If you're not in ketosis, don't reduce your calories, because all it will do, it will actually reduce your metabolism, and your body will preserve the calories that you have, and it will use fewer calories. So you're going to end up gaining at the end. So you have to be careful how you reduce your calories and when. And then now you talk about metformin. This is a very interesting topic, and it's a long one, and it's very specific just to a couple of you who have been on metformin. So I'm going to be short about it. But metformin actually is something that is completely changing your liver and also your kidneys, and completely changes your metabolism. So when you're taking metformin, it blocks many things. First of all, it blocks any gluconeogenesis in your liver. So after having taken metformin for 3 years, there may be a problem in your liver that it just simply doesn't now know how to do gluconeogenesis. And if you remember, gluconeogenesis is required, for example, to convert glucose from protein and also from fat. So this is something, gluconeogenesis stands for new glucose creation. So when you're not eating glucose, you have to create glucose, and that has to be done by the liver. Metformin blocked that. And one of the reasons why it blocked it is because it is believed, I don't know if it's true or not, but it is believed that when you have type 2 diabetes, your liver releases way too much glycogen into the system. I'm questioning that, but that's for another day to talk about it. The other problem is that metformin is also blocking your glucose absorption in your lower intestines. And so what that means is that your body is really not used to absorbing nutrients the proper way. And in order to change how it absorbs nutrients, you have to have some of the cells replaced. And the intestinal cells take approximately, I believe, 2 years. This is from the celiac studies, that it takes the celiac 2 years to completely change all the intestinal and gut cells to be able to eat properly and metabolize. They get so much damage. I don't suppose that there's any difference between that and metformin, though there could be. I don't know. I don't know if there are any studies on that, but it takes quite a bit of time to change that. And also, just so that you know, metformin is so bad of a drug that it can impair your liver permanently, and also your kidney functions, both of them. So it can be a permanent damage. We don't know that. And I don't know if 3 years means long-term or not. I'm not familiar with it enough. But another thing that happens to you in particular is that long-term use or larger dose of metformin have been associated with increased homocysteine level and malabsorption of B12. Both of those have happened to you. So I am suspecting that 3 years is a long-term use, and you could very well have permanently caused damage. Then you ask if weight gain, loss taking a long time to heal insulin resistance. So it's the other way around. So you have to resolve insulin resistance first, and then your weight gain loss is going to be really quick. It doesn't go backwards. Then a question you had, would being insulin resistant lead to immune system issues? Absolutely. If you look at what insulin resistance is, it affects every single organ. PCOS is an autoimmune disease, which is basically type 2 diabetes of your female organs. So we're talking about type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, which are the same, just at different states, affecting everything. If you're insulin resistant, you will definitely have a lot more immune issues, because your immune system is continuously on fighting insulin resistance itself. Exercise. Does it increase immune breakdown? Yes and no. So if you overdo exercise, it isn't an immune breakdown that it increases. It actually causes damage to your cells or muscles, and that can then reduce your immune response, because your body is actively trying to fix something. And every time your body is focusing on something that needs to fix, alternative body organs will suffer. However, it also improves things, because when you are, excuse me, I'm gonna get some water. When you are exercising, when you're exercising, you're getting rid of the glycogen that is stored in your muscles. And I didn't realize just how much glycogen muscles store. I posted it online in one of our groups. I forget now which one. You're storing a lot of glycogen, glucose in the muscles. And if you're not using it, it's just there. And so you end up with insulin resistance in your muscles. Just think back of when we're eating beef, for example, when you buy a nice marble fatty meat, think of what that is. Is there supposed to be fat really between muscle fibers? I don't think so. That is a stored fat there as a result of insulin resistant cows. And so they're not running marathons. They have a lot of glycogen all over the place, and that is stored. So we need to use our muscles to get rid of the glycogen stored and to get rid of the fat that is deposited in our muscles. So this way, basically also your toxins have built up. And when you exercise, your blood circulation increases, and it will allow the toxins to also clear. Not in. Still more questions from Lulu. Why are some people in a group having beef at bedtime? What determines this advice? Okay, so it is determined by sugar crash. So if people wake up 3 a.m., 4 a.m., or whenever they wake up with a migraine, that is a sign of a sugar crash during the night. The goal is to avoid sugar crashes by not eating carbohydrates. So we used to have milk at night, and we still do. Many of us still do. I don't anymore, but many of us still do, and which is fine. It's really good. It's a good electrolyte food, but it does contain carbs. So those of us who have insulin resistance, and by now we know that at the time I wrote to take milk, we didn't yet do any glucose testing. So we didn't realize just how widespread sick basically all migrants are with insulin resistance and diabetes. Now that we know, we're trying to remove carbohydrates from our diet. So the goal about beef is that it too will convert, at least 50% of it will likely convert to glucose. Doesn't have to, some of it can convert to ketones, but it takes a minimum 4 hours for it to start being synthesized. Whereas if you drink milk, within a half an hour, you already have your milk synthesized. So having beef before bedtime allows the body to synthesize while you're sleeping, just a little bit, enough to keep the blood glucose at level. And then when the morning comes, you can just eat and you're fine. So it has simply a sugar crash resolution. Do we count salt in food and or extra salt to get the day's total? So we count salt 2 ways, okay? One way is when we eat our food. For that, we have the ratio. The sodium to potassium, or the potassium to sodium ratio, is set at, in ketosis, starting at 1:1. And this usually changes as you go on. We all find that we need a lot more sodium than we need potassium. We lose sodium, we don't lose potassium that much. So this has to be, this is the protocol balance. The salt that we take during the day, we also count, but not into the ratio. So when I wake up in the morning and I take my salt pill, I don't count that into the ratio. That's not part of my 1:1. That is something that I'm taking to replace all the salt and water I lost overnight. On average, most of us in our foods, if we want 1:1, and we're eating, I'm just giving a number here, 2,000 grams of 2,000 milligrams of potassium, then we're eating on a 1:1, 2,000 milligrams sodium. So that's just the food we eat. But then we take so much extra salt that our total daily sodium, I know for me, it's always over 5,000 milligrams. Some others take 7, 8. There is one person, I believe Heather maybe, is at 10,000 milligrams sodium. So that is not the 1:1. That is sodium that you're taking for your day-to-day, all day long, just to replace the amount that you lose in terms of your hydration. Julia Roberts is asking, can you go straight from protocol to keto macros and never have to do carnivore diet or zero carb and still correct insulin resistance on keto? Or is always more beneficial to do carnivore diet or zero carb first, and why? Great question. So you can always go from protocol to keto, provided you don't show any kind of hypoglycemia or reactive hypoglycemia. That is always the point of decision. If you don't have any hypoglycemia, absolutely, you can go straight to keto, you can straight to fasting, no problem whatsoever. But like I said, remember the first question when I answered was that eventually you may come back to hypoglycemia. So you need to keep on checking it. As you reverse your insulin resistance, the chances are extremely high that you're going to find yourself again having hypoglycemia. It may be very lasting, like mine was very short lasting, but sure enough, I got back to that point, and you need to catch that so you don't end up with a crash that can harm you. Carnivore and zero carb diets are not necessary to correct insulin resistance. You can correct insulin resistance by simply not eating for 3 weeks. There have been people who have done that. I don't recommend it. You're going to end up in a major migraine, and you're going to have your blood pressure significant and heart rate significantly drop, and that's not to your migraine advantage. So I don't even permit in my groups any fasting past 3 days, and in fact, I'm now recommending only 2 days because of the heart rate variation and the blood pressure variation, and you will end up with a massive migraine. But yes, you can reverse your insulin resistance in 3 weeks of not eating. Absolutely, you can. You can completely reverse it to normal. That's not the goal, though. The goal is to remain healthy and feel well while we are reversing our insulin resistance. And not everyone, because of hypoglycemia, can do the ketogenic diet and the fasting or time-restricted feeding. So in that case, we are stuck with carnivore diet or zero carb diet. So it is not necessary, but it's definitely beneficial, particularly if you're a migraineur. It gives you a very good way of getting into allowing your body to get used to converting glucose from fat, starch fat, and to use fat as ketones. So it has a purpose, but that's not the goal. Then Vanessa Nelson is asking, I've been wondering about potassium, sodium balance and time-restricted feeding. In particular, what happens to the potassium levels the longer the window of not eating? Great question. When you're not eating, so think back to ancient times in our evolutionary past. So when you're in the savannah and your food has temporarily passed into some other animal's territory, which happens quite frequently, and you can't eat, what would the body do without the extra salt and salt and potassium? It would totally be fine. You don't have to ever replace potassium when you're not eating. One way potassium lost from the system is by metabolizing food. So if you're not metabolizing, it's just going to stay there as potassium. Very minimal will be lost. However, you will see, even in the case of animals, that the first thing they go for is salt. And salt evaporates continuously all the time. In ancient times, we didn't need so much salt to make up for things because we didn't have freeways with a lot of cars, and we didn't have neighbors that you could even hear when they burped. So you have to adjust your modern life. In our modern life, we do lose a lot of salt. We don't really lose potassium. So when you're fasting, you don't need to supplement potassium at all. You also don't need to supplement magnesium that much. You can, and I do. It depends upon how you feel, how much energy you have, and if you have any heart issues, which I do. And so I take magnesium when I'm fasting, but it's not necessary. Really, the primary thing that we need to replace when we're fasting is salt and water. Another question from you is, I think it is from you. Let me see if it was from you or did the name get cut up? Oh, Janice. So this is Janice Fulton now. So how long must a person eat 30% fat carnivore diet and 70% protein before any insulin resistance improvement is shown? It's very individual. Some people take forever, like it can be up to 2 years, depending upon how long they were on vegan diet, vegetarian diet, how much carbs in general, bad carbs they were eating in a diet, how much they were not hydrated. If you, generally speaking, come from a pretty normal, say a Mediterranean kind of a normal diet, then it's going to be very quick. It may be a month. But if you're not coming from a relatively good diet, then it's going to take a long time. So unfortunately, that is necessary. It's not something that is excuse me, well understood in the outside field, but it's necessary for migraineurs. It isn't necessary, by the way, for people who are not migraineurs. It seems that migraineurs are extremely sensitive to hypoglycemia, reactive hypoglycemia, and extremely sensitive to the liver not kicking in to produce glycogen, and that causes a lot of trouble. I'm not quite sure. Maybe this is caused by medicines. Maybe it is a genetic profile. I'm not certain, but we have a lot more trouble than people in general. Question is, what percentage of migraineurs are put on the low-fat, zero-carb carnivore diet? This is still from Janice. Very large percent. I don't know the exact percentage because I never looked at never added up how many people, but it seems that just about everybody who is doing for the first time their 5-hour blood glucose test, nearly everybody immediately is switched to the carnivore zero-carb diet. And we usually switch people who have hypoglycemia or reactive hypoglycemia on the 30% fat diet. If they don't show that, if they just show hyperglycemia, meaning it's continuously high and it just stays high, then they can go on a higher fat diet because they're less likely to crash, at least for the time being. Another question from Jen is how many of you actually improve and to what degree and how soon? Okay, so like I said, it's individual. Some people improve within a month. Some people take years. Everybody improves. Everybody recovers on this diet, and everybody can fully reverse or at least put to remission. And I'm going to explain the difference between the two on the zero carb or carnivore diet. The trick is though that as you improve on the zero carb or carnivore diet, the percentage of fat that is added back into the diet will increase over time. And here comes the last question from, or actually not last, but the next question from Janet, which is, she says, it just feels wrong to be stuffing so much meat in so often, especially when hearing so much about extending time between meals. Right. We were all told to not eat meat, and we were all told it's unhealthy. It will cause all kinds of problems, kidney failure, whatever. We've been told all kinds of bunch of nonsense. None of that is true. If you consider, as ancient humans who have today we have become, we only ate meat and fat, and we only ate vegetables when we didn't have anything else to eat. That was not our staple. Our staple food has always been meat and fat, and that is why our bodies can only use DHA, for example, for our omega-3, and we can't really use ALA, which is in plant form. So we're not used to eating plants. And so the idea of eating plants is a modern idea. We started that with the commercialization and the farming, which is basically a method of convenience. It isn't what we're supposed to be eating, but it sure was convenient to stuff a lot of peasants with just bread. And so that is why we're stuck with all the vegetables and fruits and grains, but that's not human food. Human food is only meat. And all you have to do is look back into maybe even like 50, 100 years ago, before the Inuits' diet was changed. They only ate meat and fat, and so did the Maasai, and there are a whole lot of other tribes that still to this day only eat meat and fat. So if that was bad for us, how come we're here? So no, it's not bad for us. We've just been told a bunch of nonsense. Then, and also in terms of the extending time between meals, you can. Like I am on the carnivore diet, and I only eat twice a day, sometimes once a day. Today I haven't eaten yet. I probably won't eat now for another couple of days. I'm just gonna kill this hair that is tickling me. So you can. The only reason we recommend on zero carb and on the 70% protein diet that you keep on eating is because fat is the satiating element, not protein. And so when you're eating a lot of protein, you're going to feel hungry more often. And if you feel hungry, that is more likely to cause a crash, and it is also more likely to cause a migraine. So we recommend that you eat on the zero carb diet more often, and even on the carnivore diet, until you finally start feeling a little bit better, you really should be eating as often as you're hungry. So hunger should drive you. Okay. Then you're saying that can insulin resistance be healed without the whole exercise part? No. Insulin resistance is all over your body, as I just explained earlier. So exercise really is needed to remove insulin resistance from your muscles. It may not be needed to remove it from your head, but it's needed to remove it from your muscles. So you do need to exercise. It is essential. And exercise that we ask you to do, for example, when you have a sugar crash, it is essentially replacing eating food, and it's encouraging your liver to start making glucose, glycogen, and ketones the proper way to supply you. So exercise is also a tool to reduce insulin resistance. So it's essential. And then your last question was, and this is Janice Fulton, I have no energy to do anything. Is this normal on carnivore diet, 30 fat, 70 protein? Yes, it is absolutely normal. It tells you that your body is unable to use liver glycogen at this point and muscle glycogen. Your body is not ready yet to convert protein into glucose. That is why you feel so tired. And here's what I wanted to explain, that protein, so we have 3 macronutrients, right? So we have carbohydrates, protein, and fatty acids. Of these 3, carbohydrates are not essential. So we can just live without carbohydrates, as we already have shown. So we have protein and we have fats. What are they used for? Where do you get your energy from? There's only 2 fuel types the body can use. The body for fuel, for energy fuel, can use glucose or fat, not protein. Protein is not for energy. So protein is forced on you now, not for energy. So protein has to start working for your body, and the lack of energy has to initiate your muscles and your liver to generate glucose from the protein, also for energy, for as long as it's needed, before ketosis can take fully hold. Once you take full excess of ketosis, you're fully keto adapted, then your body will use fat for energy. And at that point, protein can be reverted back into being used only for cellular recovery and repair. That is, and growth. That is the only function of protein. Protein officially, originally, isn't at all for energy. So when you're on the carnivore diet or a zero carb diet at a high protein level, don't expect a lot of energy. It's going to come though if you exercise and you force the body and give the body the message that you need to get energy. It will eventually start over to ketosis, and you will be able to use your fat as energy. And then I have a question here from Tim that I just got today, which is, what happens when we are in ketosis and we are going to eat in a non-keto restaurant? And I think that will be pretty much very close to the last question. So that's a very good question, because we all go out to restaurants, and whether we are in ketosis or on ketogenic diet or on a carnivore diet, we are in ketosis. And yes, eating in a restaurant can be pretty tricky. But assume now, as an example, that you go to a restaurant and you order food and you don't realize that it's really not keto friendly. And it has, say, you ordered, I don't know, a burger, like I did in Hawaii, without knowing that in Hawaii, every burger, they always put flour in everything. I had no idea, okay? So what happens? What happens is that you will end up having a huge sugar rush, basically. So if you measure your blood glucose after eating something that was not keto friendly, you're going to see a huge spike. And that's because when you're in ketosis, your insulin, which is our goal, is reduced. Your insulin is not really used continuously for food. It is used continuously. It's sort of kind of like, think of it as, you know, the sprinkler system. You can have a sprinkler turn on once a day in full force, or you can have the drip lines that continuously drip, right? So when you're not eating any carbohydrates, that's the drip line. Your insulin is dripping as needed continuously all the time, but it's a small amount and there is no insulin spike. When you eat carbohydrates, it has to be the big sprinkler suddenly turned on. So you have to have a lot of insulin release. You don't have that when you're on the ketogenic diet or in ketosis or carbohydrate or carnivore diet or zero carb diet. Your insulin is not used to being suddenly manufacturing a huge amount of insulin. I mean, your pancreas is not ready to manufacture that much insulin at the time. And so initially, your body is going to build up glucose, your blood. So you're going to see, like I tested once, I ate some cherries, just really, I think 10 pieces of cherries in the middle of ketosis. I think this was about a year or 2 years ago. And my blood glucose jumped. Whoa, 10 cherries took me to past diabetic level blood glucose jump. And that's because I didn't have enough insulin to reduce it. And so my insulin, caught up after a while, and it about half an hour, and it reduced it, but it overshot because I released so much insulin all of a sudden that it was too much for the amount of glucose. Also because now that I'm not insulin resistant, whatever glucose I have to remove from my blood, it's going to be pretty quick. And so my body was at that time not used to being that quick to remove the glucose. And so it released too much insulin. And so I ended up with a sugar crash. So then you're going to end up getting the reactive hypoglycemia reaction if you go to a restaurant and you eat something that is not keto friendly. It's not going to kill you. It may end up giving you a migraine because it has deregulated your entire body function and electrolytes, because as we know, glucose entering the cells will remove sodium and water. So you, after eating carbohydrates in a larger amount, unbeknownst to you or deliberately, you will be ending up with edema, and you will have to replace your salt, and you will have some trouble. So you have to be really careful when you go to a restaurant. I have found that most restaurants have trouble. Even when they're not telling you, they may be using, particularly Asian restaurants, every single meat, even if it's a steak. And I went last time to a restaurant that wasn't even an Asian restaurant, and they had steak, they also had sushi, they had other kind of things. It was like a mixed fusion restaurant. And when I wanted to get the steak, they said, oh, but we are marinated. Okay, so that's out. So you have to be asking a lot of questions. And I also recommend that you tell to a restaurant, when you go to a restaurant, that you're a celiac. Even though you're not a celiac, celiac means that they cannot create your meal together with other meals. So if they're using a desk on which, or a tabletop on which they're using any kind of an item that has flour in it, they need to have a different tabletop to create your meal, if you're celiac, to make sure that there's no cross-contamination. Or if there is a possibility of cross-contamination, they have to tell you that. But in any case, if I tell them that I'm a celiac, then I can be sure that there will at least not be flour in my food. So they were warned. And then if they send me grains, like sometimes we will have a corn flour. I said, no, that's also grain. So you have to go through literally one by one, and the waiter or waitress may have to go back and forth several times between the chef and you. And oftentimes, finally, it's all given up and the chef comes out, and then you can talk to the chef that, hey, you have this problem. Don't talk about migraine. They will not know anything. Just tell them you can't have grains, any grains. You can't have sugar, any sugar. Can't have sweeteners, any sweeteners. And if there's a chance, you can't have vegetable oils. Either you want butter or something like that instead. And so it's complicated. It's difficult. So you're going to find some restaurants where they really aren't going to welcome you. And you're going to find some restaurants where they actually will cater to you. So you have to really see where you are, what you can have, what you can't have. And you have to choose the right meal as you go on. And so I ran out of questions, and so we are about 7 minutes to the finish. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about cholesterol for the remaining 7 minutes, because there were so many questions about it, and so many of you are concerned about LDL, in particular cholesterol. I mentioned at the beginning that there's nothing to be concerned about, but I wanted to explain to you how LDL works to help your immune system. So assume that you're sick, and when you're sick, you have, say you have a viral infection or a flu, okay? The job of the LDL cholesterol actually, or cholesterol in your LDL both, is to immobilize the virus. So LDL is sticky, waxy substance. A lot more LDL will be released when you're sick, and the LDL cholesterol will actually grab a hold of the virus or bacteria, whatever problems you have, and will literally immobilize them and wait until the macrophages from your immune system can come up and gobble up the virus and the bacteria. So it has a huge, important role in how to help you feel better. And there was a really totally coincidental event in that I just got my blood test for the NMR test on the day that I was coming down with a bug. And I didn't know that. I kind of felt off and I was irritable and whatever. So I sort of kind of knew that something was up, but I didn't even consider at that point that my cholesterol will be of help. But when I got back my cholesterol results, and I had my regular cholesterol test just 3 weeks earlier. So I had 2 cholesterol tests. And I'm comparing and saying, whoa, look at the cholesterol difference within the 3-week period. And that night I came down with a bug. And I started a stomach bug. It was stomach flu. So it was clear that the day that I had my blood test, I had a huge increase in my LDL. In my regular test, 3 weeks earlier, it was 118, which is completely healthy, normal, nothing special. That day when I got my NMR, it was 165. It jumped huge. And it jumped specifically because of the infection. My triglycerides didn't jump at all. They were 59 before, 59 then. HDL increased. Before it was 70 or 74 or something, and then after it was 80. So on the day that my LDL increased, so did my HDL. So both of them increased. The LDL, you know, is grabbing a hold of all the viruses and bacteria to immobilize them so the macrophages can then kill them. The HDL increases because then it removes the used LDL particles that are no longer needed. So there's more activity. They're called the sponge cells. They pick up the unwanted, unneeded LDL cholesterol particles and take them to the liver to either be reused for something else or to be disposed of. So both my LDL and HDL were increased on the day that I actually was fighting a bug, and later on I came down with the bug. But 3 weeks earlier, they were both different. So you can see it's a moving number. It keeps on changing. So going to get your cholesterol test when you're sick or when you feel that you're kind of sort of sick is a bad day. Don't go then, because for sure it's going to show higher cholesterol and your doctor is just going to faint. So you want to avoid that situation from happening. But just for you to know, LDL has very important roles. So don't be scared of that. We now have studies that show that people who have high LDL live longer, are healthier, and overall feel much better. And people who have low LDL, it appears that most people who die from a heart attack all have low LDL. So having low LDL is definitely not the goal. It is not even a tool. And no matter how much your doctor wants you to go and reduce your LDL, don't. They also tell you that, well, there's a familial hypercholesterolemia, which means that you're going to have very high cholesterol, and it has symptoms like high cholesterol. Also, there's a gray white circle under the eye. I don't know if you can see. I had that. I had it all my life. And I also have the genes for ApoE 3-4 combo, and the 4 is the one that causes familial hypercholesterolemia. So I actually have genetically familial hypercholesterolemia, but it isn't activated fully because my cholesterol is not high. But I have the other symptoms. It doesn't make me die or flip dead tomorrow. It just simply means there's a chance that I may get it. But I have some people I know within the field of science who have it and are on the carnivore diet and are living a healthy, long life and completely happy. So don't be scared of cholesterol. Cholesterol is made by the body for a purpose. It has one of the most essential roles in our body. So don't dump cholesterol, okay? And I think with that, my time is up. Nice chatting with you all, and see you guys in the future. Bye.